welcome to Nubiart with me, Kubara. Nubiart, a different perspective on the African world. Interview with Addai-Sebo, a member of the Greater London Council team that initiated Black History Month in the United Kingdom in the mid-80s. Welcome, Addai.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit about your background first.
I will say that I am blessed and lucky to have been born and brought up during the 50s, a period of greater heightened awareness and struggle for the independence of Ghana from British rule. So I grew up and I was a beneficiary to the enlightening policies of the first Prime Minister and later the President of Ghana, the Osagyefo Kwame. He instituted the Young Pioneer Movement to inculcate the spirit of Pan-Africanism and the love for Africa and people of all Africa, whether you were born in the Caribbean, you were born in America, you were born in India, you were born in the Pacific. We were taught that we belong to the greater African family, and we were imbibed with the ideals of seeing Africa liberated and united, and Africa being the home of all African people, of all black people, of all struggling people, of all workers who were concerned about the plight of ordinary people. This is the background, and I benefited greatly from this. In the secondary school that I attended, there were students from various parts of Africa, from the Gambia, from South Africa, from East Africa, from all over Africa. And we had teachers, lecturers from various parts of Africa, and some from Europe, from the Caribbean. So it was a great moment, a great period that shaped my upbringing and understanding and acceptance of myself as a proud African.
You mentioned like the principles of Africanism, but how did that reflect in your adult life?
Well, as a young pioneer, you were brought up as the vanguard or as the future leaders of Africa, that we were being prepared intellectually for the future safety and development of Africa. We were being prepared to first love ourselves as Africans foremost, and also take inspiration from what Africans from time immemorial have achieved in the world. The building of the Great Pyramids, the establishment of first university, Sankore University, the establishment of university in Salamanca in Spain, the libraries of Alexandria, where Jesus Christ, Joseph, Moses, and all of these people went and learned. So Africa being the root of world civilization, that was what we were taught. That was the essence of the young pioneer, for us to love ourselves as Africans. That has contributed so much to world civilization. But certain incidences happened. We appear to have lost track of ourselves. So it was like what Emeka Cabral famously stated, like returning to the source. So that was what was being inculcated into us. So I grew up very conscious of who I was as an African. And I quite remember when Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966. I was about 15 years old then, and I was in high school. And the first thing that I did was to organize my other young pioneers, and we were going to go into town to go and resist the army takeover of the government, because we saw it as an aberration, as a dangerous precedent. So I grew up with that sense of self-worth as an African whose ideals and belief in the African personality could not be compromised, and I've held on to that belief until now.
How was it that you came to be in Britain?
From Ghana, I went to study in the US, and I was lucky in the US to have studied at the feet of some of the leading lights of our day. C.L.R. James basically adopted me as his son. He proudly always told people that all that I know about politics is what he has taught me. I studied at the feet of Chancellor Williams, who wrote The Destruction of Black Civilization. I studied at the feet of Ben Jekanen, Henrik Clark, and also Rabbi Martin Siegel, whose famous book, The Diary of a Rabbi, became a Broadway show. He was a radical rabbi, studied under the feet also of Myron Woolman, one of the leading systems developers in the world. I was very lucky in that I got attracted to extraordinary people, and they also welcomed me under their wings. And I remember quite well Madame Jewel Mazik, who also took me under her wings for about 3 years. And every day I'll get up at about 4 a.m., go to her house. There was a particular chair that she would like me to sit on. She said that was where Malcolm used to sit. So you sit here. So I've been very lucky. Jewel Mazik was the first African American woman to graduate in a master's degree at Howard University in the 40s. And she was a very marvelous woman, very, very strong woman. She was called Mother Africa. And Nyerere and Nkrumah and all of them knew her well. They were in the States, and Nkrumah, and they used to go to her. So I was lucky for people like Chancellor Williams to spend time teaching me, you see, individual, one-on-one basis. C.L.R. James, Henrik Clark, Ben Jekanen. I count myself very, very lucky.
Okay, so you went to America first.
I studied there, and then I was involved in the movement there, closely associated with the All African People's Revolutionary Party with Kwame Ture. I was coordinator of the Washington, D.C., Maryland chapter of the party for some time, and I was engaged in various activities, basically educational. I was the first person to establish the Africa Center in the Washington, D.C. area. I also initiated a radio program called African Root, American Fruit, but basically it's called African Roots, which is still running, and it was syndicated to about 25 other states.
That program then was about 30 years old?
Yes, still running.
Okay.
Still running.
What made you come to Britain then?
From the US, I went back to Ghana, and then fell into problems with the Rawlings regime. Basically, it was a military dictatorship, and I have had a history of fighting against military dictatorships. And I went there, and Rawlings then indicated that the country was too small for the two of us. So he sent a death squad to abduct me, but I managed to escape, and for about 3 to 4 weeks I was declared a wanted person in Ghana, and they were looking all over the place for me, but the people held me. They hid me in various villages, and then prepared a getaway for me eventually. That was 84 January. I came to Britain to seek political asylum. And I came here basically because C.L.R. James had moved from the U.S. to Britain, and he was in Brixton then. He's my father. So I came to him within the Race Today collective that was
Crazy Johnson
and all that. Yeah, so within that collective, that is where I came. So they embraced me, and from there I got a job at the Greater London Council.
So did you know Explo, Nani Kofi, in Ghana?
No, we didn't meet in Ghana, but here.
So where did the inspiration for Black History Month come from?
The inspiration came from an incident that happened at the Greater London Council, where I worked then as the coordinator of special projects within the race unit under the Director General's department. So the race unit was strategically placed right under the Director General's department. A colleague of mine came to work one morning. Her desk was not very far away from mine, and I realized that she looked very, very downcast and not herself that morning. So I asked her what was the matter, and she said that last night when she was putting her son, called Marcus, to bed, the son asked her, "Mom, why can't I be white?" The mother was taken aback, and she said she was so shocked she just did not know how to respond to her son that she has named Marcus after Marcus Garvey. The son was 6 then, and asking the mother why couldn't he be white. That set me thinking. I said, oh my goodness, what is happening? Because in the US, I initiated a program within the libraries of Washington, D.C. and the Maryland metropolitan areas, whereby I went around the libraries with the approval of the library board, demonstrating Africa and Africa's contribution to world civilization. So in the auditorium of the main library, on Wednesday, every Wednesday, they will bus in children from the various schools, sometimes 600, 500, and I'll speak to them about Africa. Tell them about how we live in Africa, the food, habits, and all that. So when this incident with Marcus took place, then it dawned on me that something had to happen here also. Of course, I was very familiar with Black History Month being celebrated during the month of February in the US. In fact, I was also part of the movement that calls to be changed Black History Month, which used to be called the Negro Week, to be changed to Black History Month in 1976.
This was in America.
In America. In 1976, I was part of that movement. It set me thinking. I said something had to be done here in the United Kingdom, because this is the belly of the beast of colonialism and imperialism and racism. You can find a 6-year-old being confused about his identity, irrespective of the fact that the mother from birth has tried to correct that. That means the mother has not succeeded. So that means the world out there and happenings in there, particularly in the classroom and the playground in the school, was so strong and powerful that it denigrated that person's identity, and to make that child question his identity as an African or being black. That was something that really touched my heart, and something had to be done. So I reflected and reflected and reflected on it for weeks and weeks, and then the only thing that came after these weeks of reflection was something has to be done to celebrate Africa's contribution to world civilization. And so I went ahead and drew up a strategic plan and discussed it with my colleagues at the Greater London Council. And the strategic plan was to get some resources approved by the various committees of the Greater London Council to mark Africa's contribution to world civilization. We did some consultations also within the community, and we did write the justification and got approval for money to organize a series of manifestations. These resulted in lectures. We brought in here Henry Clark, Francis Wilson, Ben Jekanan.
What year is this?
This was in 86, 87. Brought in this gentleman that the GLA tried to bring, and then Tony Martin, and a series of lectures were organized across London and also within the halls of the Greater London Council, which was open to the community. Some of these lecturers also went to Birmingham and Manchester and all that. We also showed some cultural manifestation, brought Max Roach, Ganaba, Hugh Masekela, Robert Northern, a whole lot of artists from the US and from Africa and the Caribbean, and put together and organized some at the Wembley Arena and the Royal Albert Hall. We filled the Royal Albert Hall with children, with school children, for a whole week. The Royal Albert Hall was filled with school children from all over Greater London. Listen to inspirational music and talk and all that. From this, then said, okay, if this has been initiated, then why not institutionalize it. So the idea of Black History Month was born.
Well, and I said, big up Kubara and the Nubiart show, giving a different perspective on Africa and the African world. Love.
So who were the initial people involved in establishing Black History Month?
Although I initiated it, I had the support of all members of the Greater London Council Race Unit. And when the GLC was abolished, there was the London Strategic Policy Unit that was established. So all the staff of the London Strategic Policy Unit, including the councillors or the borough leaders, it will be very difficult for me to single out people and mention their name, but I will say that without demeaning the contribution of others, those that will come to mind may be this very name that people know, but that does not mean that others were not involved. It was a collective effort. I managed to make this an all-party affair. Politicians from both sides, the Labour, Conservatives, the Liberals, all of them joined in this undertaking. I managed not to alienate anybody from this effort. They all contributed to make this a reality. Without that, it would not have happened. So they voted money for it. The support was there because of the justification, and they found that this time had come. So there was no resistance at all. So I will beg you to stay away from mentioning names, but I will say that it was a collective all-party effort.
Political parties were involved, the departments of the GLC were involved. Were there any organizations involved outside of the GLC or outside of the government structure?
Yes, as I indicated, there were consultations because this race unit of the Greater London Council also had a grant unit that supported various community-based organizations. They got funds from the GLC that were administered by the various departments. So we had access to all these organizations in the community. So there was effective consultation process with them for them to be part of it and locate the ownership of the process amongst them.
You mentioned the first events that you did. The first actual Black History Month, when was that? What did it consist of?
The first Black History Month event was October 1st, 1988. We brought in Mwalema Karenga, the originator of Kwanzaa, which most of you are familiar with. He was chosen specifically because of his relevance to what we were doing, and because he has launched Kwanzaa, which has become a successful part of the African calendar in the US and also in the United Kingdom. He, together with Mrs. Sally Mugabe, and then the leader of the London Strategic Policy Unit, and the leader of the Inner London Education Authority, and the various politicians, they all came together and we launched Black History Month. And this was also followed by a series of lectures in the community centers within the various boroughs. That was how the first Black History Month was inaugurated or launched.
So this was just in London though? None of the other councils outside London in Britain were involved in it?
Initially no, but later on it spread because the African Jubilee Year Declaration that was launched in August of 1987, that declaration was adopted by the Greater London Council, at that time the Greater London Council, then the Inner London Education Authority, and the declaration was also sent across the country. So it took some time before the other boroughs across the country also started adopting that African Jubilee Year Declaration, which entailed the declaration of the month of October as Black History Month.
What else was in that declaration?
The key is that it recognized the contribution of Africans to the economic and political life of London and Great Britain, and it called on the boroughs to recognize this fact and take their duties as enjoined by the Race Relations Act very seriously, and also intensify their support for the struggle against apartheid, and also to continue the process of naming monuments, parks, and buildings after illustrious African leaders. Also to do whatever within their power to ensure that children growing here in the United Kingdom do not lose the fact of their Africanness.
You called it Black History Month in America, and in a lot of other countries, Black History Month is in February. What was the thinking behind making it in October in Britain?
Again, we had to look at what lessons were to be learned from the U.S. experience. U.S. Carter G. Woodson, who originated the Negro Week, which then became the Black History Month, he chose February because of two key figures. The month of February were the birthdays of Thomas Jefferson,
An American president.
yes, American president, and also Freddie Douglass.
Thomas Jefferson or is it Abraham Lincoln?
Well, either Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Jefferson.
But definitely Frederick Douglass.
Then Freddie Douglass. But what I realized, having participated effectively in the process in the U.S., I noticed that it took place during the cold month of February. Very, very cold. And most of the events were indoors. And it was also at a time when children were tasked with schoolwork. There was no warmth to it in terms of the atmosphere.
Everybody in their big parka
big
coats.
coats and all that, you see. And so I said, what were the lessons that we learned from this? And the concern here also was children. It was the intellectual preparation of the children, that is our future generation, that was crucial to the decision making. Children, so the Black History Month was directed at children. And you said, what period of the year could you really get the attention of children? You say October, apart from its significance within the African cultural calendar, October or during the fall or autumn equinox in Africa, south of the Sahara, it is considered as the harvest period, the period of plenty, the period of the yam festival, when you planted yam, cassava, food, it was period of plenty. And it was a period from history where Africa, Egypt, for example, was the breadbasket of the world. And when the Jews in Canaan are facing pestilence and hunger, it was always Africa that they came to sustain themselves for food and to nourish themselves and to rebuild themselves and all that. So that tradition was relevant, the choice of the month of October. Apart from that, October is a period of reconciliation. It's a period of the coming together of the various bodies that entail the African societies, the kingdoms, that the various chiefs will gather at the capital, and then all differences are settled. It's also a period to examine your life, that during the preceding 1 year, the targets that we set ourselves, have we achieved these targets?
Is this only in Ghana or is this right?
No, not only in Ghana, it's across most of the African societies.
Because as you say it now, I'm just thinking of the Ethiopian New Year, which is September the 10th, 11.
Yeah.
So and you're talking about that period just after the equinox as well.
Yes.
So there's that whole mid-September period. After that, straight away comes October.
Yes, and you remember that we give the world a calendar, and all that. So we build the pyramids, knowing about astrology and all these things. So it has a meaning. The month of October was decided, taking into consideration all these factors. That was why the month of October was chosen. But apart from that, as I said, we were also thinking about the children. In October, that is the beginning of the school year. They've had a long summer vacation, refreshed their minds, and they are not saddled with classroom work, homework, and exams and all that as you have in February or in any other month. So their minds are refreshed, so they can take in a lot of instructions and all that. So that was one of the reasons why October was chosen, particularly in the United Kingdom, because of the nature of where the school year, the students and the children have come out very fresh. So if you hold this event, then they will be able to absorb the instructions that come out of it.
Like you've mentioned there at the end, that you said the thing about for Britain, right, October maybe looks like a better time of the year. But I mean, you must have never envisaged that it was ever going to be seen as out of step with the other Black History Months.
No, never. Because why? That should be very childish. Because if you look, what about the carnival? When is the carnival celebrated or marked in Trinidad?
In Trinidad, it's February.
What about in Rio?
It's February again, because they do it around Ash Wednesday, around Tuesday, Ash Wednesday, they do it around then.
So, and here
they do it
August, so it's flexible. You understand? Okay, it's flexible.
So you don't support Pan-Africanist attempts in Britain now, 2005. They're going to have African Heritage Month, they're going to call it, and they're going to have that in February. As a Pan-Africanist, they're going to take that date and they're going to leave whoever is still celebrating it in October. So you don't support the Pan-Africanist move it to February.
First, who do you consider me as? Am I not a Pan-Africanist?
Yeah.
So,
well, in terms of those organisations that have come together.
Which organisations?
Mostly around the African United Action Front.
Who are they? You can count them on your fingertips. Who are they? I will tell you this. The very same people who are behind this we had problems with in 1987, 1986. There were some people who were very, very angry with me. They didn't know me. They didn't know my background. They felt that, oh, who is this person?
You don't been here 2 years.
Who is this person who is doing all this? Who is he? He's not a part of our community and this and that. They didn't know my background. They resisted it. But later on, they took it and they became something. It became a force. It's a force in itself. The current was too strong. The community embraced it and they had to go with the current. I don't know the justification. If the justification is because it is held in February and also the claim that it has been hijacked by the establishment, that claim is not relevant because it hasn't been hijacked. If anything at all, what is it that they themselves are doing to give substance and meaning to Black History Month? By shifting it to February, does it mean that the content of Black History Month will be different?
I think you find in this country, October is a time, right, if you're an independent organisation, it's very hard to find a venue that the local councils haven't already booked up with their events. So if you wanted to just put something on, the libraries have gone, the community halls have all gone to events that are sponsored by the local council.
But what is the local council? Who are those working in the local council? Are they not our own people working within the local council? They are our own people who live in the communities. They are not different. They are taking initiatives and they do not do it for themselves. People participate and there are several venues. There are churches all over in the US. They are held in churches, home here and there. Venue is not a problem at all.
So you don't buy that argument that like the local authorities have kind of taken over and dominate that?
No.
The other thing they say is local groups that can't get funding any time of the year, the only time they can get a little bit of funding is to put on an event in October.
You know that is the political climate that we live in. Since the abolition of the GLC and the effect of the Margaret Thatcher regime is still felt at this time. The initiatives under Ken Livingstone, Paul Boateng, Benny Grant and all that during the GLC was frowned upon by the Conservative government, and that led to the abolition of the Greater London Council and the source of funding for most community organizations and all that. So the community has suffered as a whole as a result of the policies of a particular political regime. That is what we have to look at. So there is a squeeze on the availability of funds in general. It's tight. So it depends on our own creative ingenuity. Why does it have to be October? It doesn't. There can be several openings. If you come up with creative endeavors that can attract funding. But apart from that, again, there are the churches. If you go with creative programs, you get support from the churches. In the US, the churches play a very critical role in the daily lives of African American people. Here too, I believe the churches, if you look at the independent education now institutions and all that, the churches are playing a tremendous role. So some of us who are activists, I think we should cast our minds wider and be creative.
Some of the Pan-Africanists are not aligned to Christianity or Islam. They claim a much more traditional African religion.
Whatever you belong, use that as a motive force and drive to generate the necessary resources in order to do what has to be done. The danger here is that we have become used to forming circles and shooting at each other and getting nowhere. There are serious problems facing us as African people, and if people have energy to spend, I am appealing to them to use it properly, because there's a lot more facing us.
Another criticism is of the way it's gone over the 17 years. You mentioned you started off with the history lectures, and people are saying like a lot of the time what's being promoted by the councils is cooking and dancing and singing. But the history lecture part has maybe been reduced to history being in a cooking lesson. Do you see that?
Here again, I like to look at solutions rather than criticism. So if I see that, okay, the British Museum holds events to mark Black History Month, first, it is positive. It is not the British Museum as an institution, but there are a group of individuals, maybe one or two, that are there. So why don't I go to them? Maybe in November or September, I go and sit down with them and say, look, these are my skills. You did a wonderful job this year. What can we do to make it better next year? You start from there. They will welcome you. Go there, because there are people like you yourself that are taking the initiatives. But they will be limited, and they may be doing this against maybe tremendous odds and difficulties even within there. I will tell you.
I met one woman who worked in the library up in Haringey, and it was her one putting it on. And if you asked anybody else in the library, they knew nothing else about it. They say, no, there's only one person you can speak to. We don't do anything like that at all.
And she needs the support of this so-called Pan-Africanists. Seek these soldiers of our heritage. Seek them out and give them the support. They are quietly doing what they can, and we should not condemn what they are doing. We should seek them out. They need our support. Last year at the British Museum, I went there. They had invited Hugh Masekela and others. Then after the event, I sought out who organized it, and they took me to his office, and I saw a white man, an Anglo-Saxon, an anthropologist. He organized it and has been organizing Black History Month. I sat down with him, and he was very happy to see me, and he started recounting the difficulties, the problems that he has been facing.
Because he's isolated.
Yes, so we have to seek these people out and not try to dampen their spirits by unnecessarily criticizing and all that. Yes, you may find some problems with maybe the activities of the Greater London Authority or what have you, but we have to be very careful that we do not throw the baby away with the bathwater. We have to be careful that these activities that are generated across the country, there are equally dedicated Africans, Pan-Africanists, who have taken the initiative, utilizing the available resources to let these activities come about. We should encourage them.
Nowadays, Asians are classed as black, Kurds are classed as black, Irish are classed as black, and their events are all put in the same Black History Month calendar. Is that what was in your original vision?
What we must not forget is that every struggle takes place within the universe, and wherever it is located, it's subject to various impressions. You get solidarity and support, and you must not ignore that solidarity and support. And also, we have to pay homage to our essence as human beings, our essence as the originators of civilization, our essence as where Eve or where humanity evolved, Africa. So we embrace everybody, and this was very, very clear in the teachings of Honorable Mosiah Marcus Garvey. There was solidarity with the struggles of the Indian or the Irish. It was very, very clear. And African Jubilee Year Declaration recognized this solidarity. And because of the historical juncture of our struggles in the United Kingdom here, the word or the term black has been used to encompass the struggle and solidarity of oppressed people who have suffered under the whip of colonialism, imperialism, apartheid, and all that. So we don't want to lose that essence of solidarity. So if blackness brings along all these strands, there's nothing wrong with it, because we cannot struggle alone.
But solidarity is different from actually what was the focus of this specific celebration of Black History Month. Was Africa the focus, or was anybody who came under that banner of Black the focus?
Africa is the core of it, is the essence of it. That was why we started with the contribution of Africa to world civilization. That was what was started in 1986-87, and the lecture series and all that, the activities. But even that, we used that occasion to let the people of Britain know that during a period when they themselves said that they were being attacked by the savages from the Nordic countries, it took an African, Septimus Severus, who was then Emperor of Rome, who came here, rebuilt the Hadrian Wall, and gave people of Britain 100 years of uninterrupted peace. Then we think about Augustine, St. Augustine, who was also here. Then we think about Damien, the first bishop of Ireland. Then we think about Maurice, the celestial saint of the Germans. So we put all these together for them to understand the import of Africa to their daily lives. What the meaning of Africa to the British. That the essence of racism is stupid, because even if you go further, you know about Queen Sophia, Charlotte, and the relationship with Victoria and the descendants in terms of the present Queen Elizabeth. Even if you look at her hair structure and the features, and you can see the African blood coursing through her veins. Princess Anne, you can see the strength of her hair structure and the face. You can't miss it. So we have to be very careful that we do not alienate ourselves by being isolationist and puritanistic in our attempts to define ourselves in relation to our redemption. It's a human endeavor, and humanity has its origins from Africa. And who was it? Is it Peter Tosh? What did he say?
No matter where you come from, so long as you're a black man, you're an African.
Yeah, what's up? This is Chuck D for Kubara Nubiart right here. This is Chuck D, Public Enemy #1. Keep it locked.
You don't have any qualms then about not calling it African History Month and actually focusing specifically on people of African descent?
That is the essence of it. There's no problem with it. The name black, it has become a historical imposition. It is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. It's a communications vehicle.
Because now they've changed the name. They are actually going to call it African Heritage Month.
They cannot change the name. It's taking roots. It's just a handful of people, and they are going to hold an assembly. That's what they claim in October again. You understand? Not in February, but in October. They're riding on the back. It's opportunism. It's class opportunity. It will die on its own. It has no relevance at all. Serious-minded people will not give any credence to what is happening. No. It has no relevance at all. It will die a natural death.
Have you got any comment on Trevor Phillips' view that we need to move away from even multiculturalism and embrace integration into the majority dominant culture?
Unfortunately, I was not in the country.
Fortunately for
yes,
you.
Yes, I was not in the country at that time.
He was saying that we need to move away from black culture and learn more Shakespeare, which I think if he knows a Shakespeare...
that is his opinion, and again, it will not resonance in the community is something that I think he regrets by now. I strongly believe that he regrets saying that.
Something you make a personal statement that you would make in your house, and
yes.
you make it in public.
Yes.
But when you say it to the wider public, it kind of sounds a bit absurd.
Yes. I think he regrets by now for having come out with such a statement after all these years of struggle to have left the African personality, the Nkrumahs, the Maurice Bishops, even the Malcolm X and Garveys and all these will be saved in their graves. It's a mistake. It's an error, I think. I strongly believe that he recognizes it. And I'll offer an apology on his behalf to our community.
The phrase, how can you discover your national identity without speaking your language? How important is learning an African language for people outside Africa to maintain their culture?
Language is the bedrock of a person's identity. If you take a person's language away from him or her, you have basically denigrated the person. And this was what was done to us as a people. I'm now speaking to your listening audience through the medium of English. And the colonizers recognized the importance of this. They did everything to remove that essential spiritual essence from us as a people. So language is very, 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 very important. It is important and essential for us to try and speak another language apart from English. Try and speak any African language that you think you will find it easy to speak. It's very important.
The influence of American culture, are we turning Americocentric rather than Afrocentric?
When you say American culture, you see nature abhors vacuum. And what you are saying now is a serious indictment on our leadership here. It is our failure, including myself, it is our failure that has enabled what you call American culture to creep here wholesale. So these so-called Pan-Africanists who see that the challenge facing them now is to move Black History Month from October to February, I would like them to think about this challenge or the failure of our leadership to allow that vacuum to exist, for it to be filled by influences that are inimical to our African self-awareness. And this is very critical.
Because even on the continent, the American influence, I was watching a video. These people were in Eritrea, southwest Eritrea. They'd gone to do a field trip and they made a video and they brought it back for me to watch. And there was an old man, he was like a nomad, but he had a Tupac t-shirt on. I mean, obviously somebody's donated it to him, but you know, they weren't in the city. This was out in, you know, nomadic, just open country. You know, so even as far down there as that, somebody had gone with that.
Yeah, it's the penetration of Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Nestle, a whole lot of things that we have to guard ourselves against. This is a challenge of leadership. Where are our leaders leading us? That is the challenge, be it here or at home on the continent, or at home in the Caribbean. This is a challenge facing our leadership.
So what message do you have for the youth of today?
The youth of today, I will say that my generation, we have not lived to expectation and we have failed you. My generation, who to you, we are your elder brothers, uncles, fathers. I don't think we have applied ourselves diligently to your education. We have let you loose without much guidance. We have allowed the system to consume our sense of responsibility to our own children, our nephews and nieces. We don't have time for you. We cannot sit down with you, evening on a dining table, eating together with you and sharing some experiences. We cannot even read a story about Malcolm X or Marcus Garvey to you. We are not doing that. That is our failure. We have failed you, and it is time for you, the youth, to challenge us. Why have you let us into this condition that we have become a ridicule, that we have become like tailless rats? We don't know where we are going when we wake up in the morning. We have no inspiring perspectives to hold our lives onto. We can only sit in front of the television and imbibe whatever messages that come. What is the form of entertainment that my generation have prepared for you, the youth? Nothing. We cannot hold your attention and make you believe and accept yourself as Africans, as people who have contributed immensely to world civilization, as people who, during a period when your ancestors who were in the United States and in the Caribbean were banned from being taught how to read and write, until this ban was lifted in 1875, there were over 1,750 inventions that your ancestors made, but their slave masters took the patent for these inventions. That is your heritage. If you look at this country, you hear about Electric Avenue in Brixton. Do you know, has your uncle, your father, told you that it was an African born in the United States who came and set up the electricity system here in this country? Latimer. He set up the electricity system in London, in Amsterdam, and in New York. It was Latimer, an African. We have contributed so much, and it is only when you get to love who you are because of the knowledge of what those who went before you have done, that is when you begin to appreciate the African world that you live in. So please, you the youth, challenge us, ask us questions, ask my generation, why have we let you so loose?
What role should the media play in promoting African culture?
If you talk about the media, then you look at mainly the print in this country. The Voice, Gleaner, The Nation, Caribbean Times, Asian Times, and all that is very limited. Then of course you have New African and the other magazines, but it's limited. They are doing their best, it's limited.
What about in terms of radio and TV?
Radio and TV. TV again is very limited. Radio is expanding because of what we erroneously call the rebel radios, or the pirate radios, erroneously called the pirate radios. Again, here, I don't think any radio station or manager will be against any Pan-Africanist who humbly goes to the station and come up with some creative programming that the educational content can be appreciated by the wider listening audience. No manager of a radio station will be against. So I'm calling again on our generation, particularly the loudmouth Pan-Africanists, to be creative and use their energies constructively and impact the media with well thought out programs that are sensitive to the demands of the day. And I strongly believe that the likes of your station and others will welcome such program interventions. I did the same thing in the US in the 70s. I saw that there was something missing. I wasn't hearing too much of the word Africa. So I went to Pacifica radio station, saw the manager, sat down, discussed this, and he said, yes, I will give you an hour if you will come up with a program scheme. So I went, called some friends around, and we put together a program scheme. And we called African Roots, American Fruit. And it's been going on for 30 years. So it can be done. It's taking the initiative. And also, you have to be very calmly about it. You don't have to make it appear that you know everything. You are right. And very judgmental, pointing fingers and finding everything wrong with everything. When you do that, you drive away people. It doesn't work. You can't get far. You are dealing with human beings. So you have to show respect and let them engage. It's engagement. Engage people. Engage people. Engage people. Engage people.
So do you feel that what you set up as Black History Month, do you feel that that has been a success, looking back over the almost 20 years that you've been involved in this country?
Oh yes, it has become a major factor in race relations in this country. That is the reality, and that cannot be denied. You know, in 1988, I thought of setting up a clearinghouse to coordinate all activities and give direction in terms of the content of manifestations during the Black History Month. I went and spoke to, he just died, Garrison.
Len Garrison.
Len Garrison, yes. I had a series of meetings with him, Cecil Gatsmore, and other people, trying to see how we can establish that clearinghouse. But I personally was having some problems with some so-called Pan-Africanists who felt that, if anything at all, the idea of the Black History Month should have come from them. It has no business having come from me because they did not know me. So I said that with all this nominal, what I'll call nominal opposition, the best thing was to withdraw quietly and let them take ownership of it, which I did. Until now, I haven't come out. I've stayed very, very, very quietly as if I didn't exist. And I think that's a good move. I'll allow them to take over it, and they became the apostles of it also. And I congratulate them. They have done very, very well. They have done very, very well. But the momentum took off within the community, and I think it will be very difficult to reverse it. Very, very, it's a foolhardy exercise. It cannot be reversed.
So what are you working on now?
At the moment, I'm working on a project to give meaning to the third millennium. The project that I'm working on is called Listen. It's a group of us that have come together saying that the problem of the 21st century that we are in now should be that of the next generation, that's the children. The focus of our rest and attention should be the disadvantaged children of the world, particularly in the developing countries. And we want this to attract the attention of governments and decision makers all over the world. So that is the project that I'm working on, that we should listen to children and their experiences. We are used to speaking to and at children, but the time has come for us to listen to the children, the pains that they are going through, the difficulties that they have. We don't have the patience to listen carefully to children. And I'm calling upon my generation now to make it their duty as from today to listen to their children. Listen to your children. Listen to your nieces and nephews. When they come back from school, watch them. Look at their body language and listen to them. Let them tell you their experiences. Is very important. And we will learn a lot. And from there, we will be able to develop the necessary strategy to deal with the challenges that face us.
Okay, finally, is there anything you want to add?
I've spoken enough. A word to the wise is enough.
Nubiart, a different perspective on the African world.